You're not stuck. You're just focusing too much on the same thing every single day. This sentence might feel a bit uncomfortable at first, but it holds a deep truth that few are willing to face. Life isn't standing still. You are stuck in the same daily observation, stuck on the same focus, the same emotions, the same thoughts, day after day. And what's most curious is that even when you try, when you push, when you give it your all, nothing really seems to change. It feels like you're walking in circles. But what if the issue isn't a lack of external movement, but rather an internal loop? You wake up and see the same problems. You react with the same emotions. You replay the same mental dialogues. The mind, like a lens that distorts the landscape, is conditioned to only notice what confirms what you already believe. And the universe, which faithfully responds to your vibration, just keeps showing you more of the same. In this video, we're going to dismantle that illusion together. You'll gain a clear and deep understanding of how to break this cycle without needing to change anything on the outside. The key lies in something much simpler and infinitely more powerful: changing what you choose to observe. Because reality doesn't shift when the world changes. It shifts when you begin to look at it with new eyes. Why you feel stuck even when you're in motion. Have you ever felt like you're always doing something, always trying, always searching for a way out, and yet nothing really changes? Like you're in constant motion, but not getting anywhere. As if life were a treadmill. You walk, you run, you push, but the scenery around you stays exactly the same. That feeling isn't random. It's a direct reflection of what's happening inside you. Most people believe that action alone is the path to transformation, that if they just do enough, fight hard enough, persist bravely enough, things will inevitably change. But here's a truth few are willing to see. Action without a shift in inner observation is just repetition disguised as effort. It's continuing to project, vibrationally, the same reality over and over, even if it wears a different face. When you constantly observe lack, problems, fear, pain, or the absence of solutions, you send a steady, energetic message to the universe. This is what exists. This is what's alive in me. And since everything in the universe responds to the frequency of your consciousness, it just keeps bringing you more of what you're already seeing. In other words, your reality isn't repeating because you deserve less, because you're not trying hard enough, or because luck didn't choose you. It's repeating because you're chronically and unconsciously observing the same things. The human mind is incredibly powerful, but also deeply conditioned. It tends to fixate on what's familiar, even if the familiar is uncomfortable. If you've spent years observing scarcity, rejection, failure, or struggle, your mind has developed an internal radar tuned to pick up exactly those signals around you. It's like your perception has been trained to confirm a single narrative, the one that says you're stuck. And the more you keep observing that, the more real that story becomes. Emotion triggers thought. Thought reinforces focus. Focus fuels emotion, and the cycle feeds itself like an invisible but highly efficient mechanism. That's why you can change cities, jobs, relationships, or routines and still end up feeling the same way after a while. Because what truly sustains your reality isn't the external setting, but the way you observe it. Your inner lens is the source code of your experience. And if it's programmed to perceive limitation, it won't matter where you are or what you're doing. The world will still feel limited. So when you ask yourself why you still feel stuck, even while moving, it's important to ask, what kind of movement am I making? Because if your movement is just an escape from what you fear, it's still anchored in the vibration of fear. If it's an effort to fix something you believe is wrong with you, it's still rooted in the idea of lack. What needs to shift isn't just what you do, but what you observe. Changing your observation is like changing the angle from which you see the world. Nothing in the scenery needs to move immediately. But when you shift your focus, what was once invisible starts to appear. Opportunities that used to go unnoticed begin to stand out. New ideas come to life. Different people come closer. And finally, you begin to feel something you haven't felt in a long time. Lightness. Not because the world outside changed, but because you stopped running in internal circles. And you finally started creating movement where it truly matters, within your consciousness. How repetitive observation creates a cyclical reality. The life you're living today, with all its patterns, challenges, and victories, isn't just a random series of events or the result of chance. It is, for the most part, a direct reflection of what you observe repeatedly. The universe, as complex as it may seem, responds in an incredibly simple way to one very specific frequency, the frequency of your attention. What you consistently observe becomes the backdrop of your experience. And when that observation is unconscious, automatic, and rooted in scarcity, limitation, or fear, the result is always the same: repetition. You wake up and, without realizing it, focus on the same problems. You react with the same feelings. You zero in on the same lack. And by repeating this process every single day, you unintentionally generate a vibrational field that reinforces exactly what you're trying to change. It's like being stuck on a mental playlist that always plays the same songs. Songs about scarcity, worry, struggle, and impossibility. And no matter how much you say you want something new, as long as you keep hitting play on the same emotional and mental track, the world around you will keep dancing to the same rhythm. This repetition creates a cyclical reality, and that cycle doesn't persist because you consciously want it to. It continues because your attention is programmed to revolve around what's familiar. And what's familiar, even when uncomfortable, feels safe to the mind. Neuroscience already shows us that the brain prefers repeating known patterns over stepping into the unknown, even when the unknown is positive. That means your internal system actually finds it more comfortable to keep observing the same problems than to focus on new solutions it hasn't experienced yet. Here's the key point. Your frequent observation becomes a kind of vibrational command. By focusing every day on the same point of limitation, you send out a frequency that says, "This is important, this is real, this is what I recognize as my world." And the universe, which doesn't judge, it only mirrors, simply gives you more of the same. Not out of cruelty, but because that's the language it speaks. Frequency, vibration, focus. And maybe now you understand why certain situations keep repeating under different names. Why emotional cycles return as if they're new, but always carry that same old essence. Why you keep bumping into the same type of problem, even when everything around you seems to have changed. The cycle continues because your observation hasn't changed. You can change the scenery, the setting, the characters, but if the observer stays the same, the experience will repeat itself. That's why it's not enough to want a new reality. You have to start observing differently. And that doesn't mean ignoring problems or pretending everything's fine. It means building a new relationship with what you see. It means consciously choosing where you place your attention. Because where your attention goes, your energy flows. And where your energy flows, your reality begins to take form. The real turning point happens when you realize repetition isn't a punishment. It's a signal. A call to break the cycle from the only point that can truly transform it, the point of your own awareness. When you shift your focus, even slightly, you begin to access new frequencies. And the universe, always sensitive to your vibration, begins to respond in new ways. So take a closer look at what you've been feeding with your daily observation. Are you giving your attention to possibility or to lack? Are you focusing on what you want to experience or on what you're trying to avoid? Are you looking at life like someone waiting for a miracle, or like someone who understands the miracle begins with the way you see? The reality that keeps repeating is simply the one you haven't yet dared to observe differently. And the good news is, at any moment, you can change your focus. You can switch the internal track. You can choose a new song. And when that happens, the whole world begins to move to a different beat. The invisible cycle: emotions, thoughts, and focus. There's a silent cycle operating within you, an invisible, yet incredibly powerful pattern that shapes not only what you feel, but also what you see, what you believe is possible, and even how far you think you can go. This cycle is made up of three forces that feed into each other: emotion, thought, and focus. Together, they create a kind of vibrational spiral that keeps your reality spinning around the same points day after day. It all begins with an emotion, a subtle or intense feeling triggered by a memory, an expectation, or something happening in the present moment. That emotion gives rise to a certain type of thought, and that thought directly influences what you start noticing in the world around you. By focusing on what confirms that internal state, you reinforce the very emotion that started the process. And just like that, the cycle closes, only to begin again, almost always without you realizing it. Imagine someone who constantly feels frustrated. That emotion leads them to think over and over again that things never go right, that life is hard, that nothing really changes. Those thoughts in turn guide their focus. They begin to notice only what reinforces that mindset: the delays, the problems, the obstacles. They may even have successes throughout the day, get good news, or enjoy a light moment, but their perception has already been trained to filter that out, because their focus is wired to look for what confirms frustration. And by seeing more of it, the original emotion deepens. They feel more frustration, think even more about how hard everything is, focus even more on what's going wrong, and the cycle keeps spinning. This mechanism is invisible because it happens fast, and because it's become a habit. Often, you don't even realize you've been stuck in the same emotional loop for weeks, months, or even years. The familiarity of that inner state disguises itself as personality, as reality, as just who you are. But what's actually behind it is an observation pattern powered by an emotion that was never redefined. That's why trying to change your reality using just positive thoughts or superficial affirmations rarely works. If the underlying emotion stays the same, the thought is just an attempt to paint over a dense vibrational field. In that case, the focus doesn't shift. And if the focus doesn't shift, the external reality stays the same. The key to transformation is breaking the cycle. And that begins with a choice. The choice to observe with awareness. To observe the emotions you've been feeding, the thoughts they generate, and the places your focus keeps returning to each day. Understand this: if you believe there's no way out, then even if a door opens right in front of you, you won't see it, because your observation is conditioned to find walls, not exits. It's like being in a dark room, holding a flashlight, but constantly pointing it at the same corner. You say you want something new, but you keep looking in the same direction. The new thing is there, just outside your field of vision. But when you begin to interrupt that cycle, even slowly, something powerful begins to happen. A small shift in emotion generates a new thought. That new thought redirects your focus toward other aspects of reality. And by focusing on something new, your emotion also begins to change. The spiral spins in a new direction, and that's when the magic begins. You become capable of seeing what was once invisible, because what you choose to observe determines what you're capable of seeing. And seeing something new is the first step to creating something new. But to do that, you have to break out of emotional autopilot. You have to step out of the old cycle, because as long as the old emotion is running your thoughts and focus, life will simply repeat the same vibrational patterns you've already lived. And you're not here to repeat, you're here to expand. How to change your reality without changing anything outside? One of the greatest illusions the mind creates is the idea that, in order for our lives to change, the world around us must change first, that circumstances need to improve, that people need to act differently, that results need to show up, and only then will we be able to feel good. This logic is so common, it almost feels natural, but it's completely backwards. Because true change never starts on the outside. It begins in the quietest and most powerful place there is, your internal stance. And that stance is determined by how you observe reality. Changing your observation is like changing the direction of light in a room. What you shine it on becomes visible. What you leave in the shadows stays hidden. But what's there doesn't change. What changes is what you see, and that changes everything. When you start observing what's working, even if it's just a little, you begin to activate the frequency of gratitude. When you begin to acknowledge what's available now, instead of focusing only on what's missing, you align yourself with the energy of abundance. And when you start noticing the small opportunities that have always been there, you connect with the flow of movement. This doesn't mean denying reality or pretending everything's fine when it's not. It means accessing a new level of awareness within the reality you're in. It means looking with more presence, more openness, and less judgment. A mind trained to spot problems will resist at first. It'll try to pull you back into old patterns. It'll say it's useless, that nothing's changed yet, that it won't make a difference. But with patience and practice, you begin to reprogram your focus. And where there's new focus, there's new energy. The most surprising part? When this inner change is sustained, the external inevitably begins to shift. People respond differently. Circumstances align. Paths that once seemed invisible begin to appear. Not because the world changed first, but because you change how you see and how you show up. Reality has always been a mirror. It simply reflects with precision what you hold within. So if you feel like everything is stuck, like nothing is moving, like the scenery never changes, try changing the lens. You don't need to change your house, your job, your partner, or your city. You need to change your perspective. When you shift what you choose to observe, you shift your vibration. And your vibration is the signal that speaks directly to the universe. You begin to tune into a different layer of reality, one with more lightness, more openness, more flow. That's how you change your reality without changing anything out there. Not because the external doesn't matter, but because it's the effect. The true cause is within. It lies in your ability to see what's new, even when everything seems the same. And when that vision sets in, it transforms the invisible into possibility. And step by step, reality responds. Practical exercise. Reprogramming your observation. Real change doesn't happen just when you understand something intellectually. It happens when you live what you've understood, when knowledge stops being just an idea and becomes a daily practice, a conscious movement, a vibrational choice. And in this process of inner transformation, reprogramming how you observe life is one of the most powerful tools you can activate. Your current reality is directly connected to what you observe most throughout your day, to the stories you silently repeat, to the sensations you allow into your body first thing in the morning, to the automatic thoughts that fill your mind when nothing else is demanding your attention. All of that builds the field of your dominant vibration, and that field is what shapes the reality you experience. So if you want to break the cycle of repetition and create space for a new reality, you have to practice a new way of observing. And that process starts with honesty. You need to take a clear look at what you've been choosing to observe, even if it's uncomfortable. What themes keep showing up in your attention? What situations do you replay in your mind, even after they've passed? What emotions are you feeding simply out of habit? That's where reprogramming begins, when you stop observing from a place of pain and start observing with presence. When instead of simply reacting, you begin to choose what's worthy of your attention. This takes practice. It takes a fresh intention every time you look at something that once felt ordinary. And above all, it takes consistency, because the old pattern will try to pull you back. It'll try to convince you it won't work. But the more you hold the new perspective, the more your vibration stabilizes in that new frequency. A powerful exercise to support this process is the conscious substitution of observation. When you identify something you usually observe through a negative lens, like a recurring problem, a limitation, or a self-judgment, you propose a new way of seeing it. This isn't about denying what exists, but about bringing a fresh perspective to the same point. What once looked like an obstacle can now be seen as a call for expansion. What once triggered frustration can now be viewed as an invitation to shift directions. When you change the meaning, you change the emotion. And when the emotion changes, the thought reorganizes. Focus aligns with a new narrative. For 3 days, practice this new way of observing in a conscious way. Each morning, choose the filter through which you'll see the world that day. Instead of looking for what's wrong, look for what's alive. Instead of focusing on what's missing, observe what's available. Even if it seems small, even if it seems invisible. This practice, though subtle, holds immense power because it begins to unlock spaces within you that were once blocked by unconscious habits of perception. A simple phrase can help anchor this new internal state, something that works as a vibrational reminder of your choice. Something like, "Today I observe with new eyes. Everything can change now." Saying this with intention, feeling the truth of it, is already the first step toward breaking the old cycle and activating a new reality. Reprogramming your observation isn't something that happens in a single moment. It's a path, a process of continuous presence, a decision to no longer live on emotional autopilot. And as you commit to this new way of seeing, you'll begin to notice what was always there, but your old perception couldn't grasp: the signs, the invitations, the subtle movements of the universe. You don't need to change the world to change your life. You just need to change what you choose to see in it. Transformation begins when you see what you've always ignored. Changing your life is not, at its core, about discovering something entirely new. It's about noticing what has always been there, but what you never allowed yourself to truly see. It's like being in the same place for years, and one day slightly turning your head and noticing a window that's always been open, but that you never looked at before. True transformation doesn't require you to move physically first. It asks that you shift the place you're looking from. And when that shift happens, the whole world begins to look different, even if on the outside everything is still the same. There's a simple but powerful metaphor that captures this process. Imagine a beam of light entering a dark room. The light doesn't move objects around, doesn't rearrange furniture, doesn't change the environment. But wherever it touches, it reveals, and in revealing, it transforms. What once seemed hidden, confusing, or absent is now visible, available, real. What changed? The light, the direction of your gaze, the choice to see. You might be living in the same house, facing the same challenges, surrounded by the same people. But if your observation shifts, something within you realigns with a new layer of reality. And this is more than just metaphor. It's an energetic process. Your field of perception, once expanded, begins to detect possibilities that were once hidden behind the filter of limitation. You begin to notice different ideas, feel subtler inspirations, perceive synchronicities that used to slip by unnoticed. None of this is coincidence. It's the universe responding to your new frequency of observation. For a long time, maybe you've been looking at the same things in the same way, at your struggles with judgment, at your emotions with resistance, at your experiences with criticism. And all of that shaped the perception of a narrow, exhausting, and dead-end reality. But what if, just for a moment, you chose to look at all of it with more curiosity than fear, with more acceptance than resistance, with more openness than rigidity? What would you see? Maybe the pain you've tried so hard to avoid is simply there to redirect you. Maybe the pattern that bothers you most is trying to reveal something you've never embraced. Maybe what seems like an ending is actually a disguised beginning. But for that to be revealed, your way of seeing must change. You have to step out of the conditioned perspective that labels everything as a problem and begin to see the potential hidden behind the apparent chaos. Transformation happens when you begin to see the invisible. And the invisible here isn't something mystical or unreachable. It's what's always been right in front of your eyes, but your survival-trained mind didn't consider it important. It's the detail that carries the invitation. It's the simple gesture that holds the sign. It's the silence that brings the answer. All of it is already present. It's just been waiting to be noticed. When you choose to observe with more awareness, you activate connections that have been asleep. You touch parts of yourself that have been silent. And in that silent touch, entire realities begin to reconfigure. Not through force, but through resonance. You change on the inside, and the universe responds in kind. That's vibrational intelligence at work, with precision. That's why it doesn't matter how long the cycle has lasted. At any moment, you can break it, and it all begins with one simple yet powerful gesture: shifting your gaze. Because what you observe doesn't just show you the world, It shows who you are being as you observe it. And when you choose to see with more truth, more love, more presence, you move closer to your most awakened self. And that self already carries a new reality in its vibration. We've reached the end of our journey, and maybe now you can feel something that wasn't there at the beginning. The realization that you were never truly stuck. What looked like stagnation was actually just a fixed gaze on the same point, an unconscious focus constantly fueling the same patterns. The good news is, you have the power to change that. Not by trying to fix the world outside, but by learning to observe with awareness. Over the next 24 hours, make this commitment to yourself. Observe only possibilities, signs, beauty, and movement. Try on this new way of seeing. Let yourself look with more lightness, more openness. And then, tell me in the comments what changed. Remember, the key was never outside. It has always been in what you choose to see. And now that you know this, the next step is yours.